Who is winning this thing? It's hard to tell, but the Harris campaign is fully out there in the world doing their thing now. Trump has been keeping in touch with his real running mate, Vladimir Putin. Will it matter to people? 27 days to go. Let's take a look at the polls, shall we? Welcome back to the podcast for the 54% of Americans who regularly vote for progress in every election and want to convince their friends and family members to join our majority. This is Majority 54.
Well, Jason, Harris and Walz are out there. The horse is out of the barn. They have done a media blitz, and their choices are gaining a lot of attention, a lot of commentary. I think the most notable decision they made at this sort of early phase of this media blitz was to go on a podcast called Call Her Daddy, hosted by Alex Cooper. Jason, had you heard of this podcast before this?
I think I had heard of it because I think you have, for some reason or another, told me about it in the past, because despite the fact that we are like 2 or 3 years apart, you're sort of my ambassador to the younger generation and to all things cool in pop culture.
Well, I always forget which podcast I talk about stuff on, but it was like I vaguely remember talking about her at some point as just somebody who's really good at the craft, and her content is not meant for people like me, as she explicitly mentions at this front of this podcast. She gave like a disclaimer saying, look, like, I try not to be political, and I want to commend her, by the way, to start, that this was a risky decision. About a quarter of her audience are Republicans. And
well, can I just say, Ravi, we end every show with saying, use your platform. She's doing it.
Well, you imagine a lot of people don't want to alienate their audiences, right? And she decided, as did Taylor Swift, that it was worth it. And this wasn't a full-throated endorsement, but it was basically that. Like, she didn't explicitly say it, but she was, by the tone of her questioning and the intro to the podcast, was very clear that she cares about women's issues. She cares deeply about the issue of choice and the abortion debate. And she did say she extended an invite to Trump to talk about women's issues. And no surprise, he has not yet taken her up on this offer. But it's important to note before we start playing clips that this was a great decision. The numbers indicate that there's about 5 million regular listeners of this podcast, and it's normally in the top 5 to 10 of all podcasts in the world, and is now top 1 after this interview, like this week at least, because of obviously this interview is garnering a lot of attention. So you can imagine she probably got double her normal audience, at least 10 million for this podcast. And the numbers from Edison Research show exactly why Harris picked this podcast. 70% women, 76% under 35, 93% under 45, 48% Democrat, 24% Republican, 20% Independent, 34% in the South, 24% in the West, 22% Northeast, and 20% Midwest. So a diverse,
it's like
large
perfectly
audience.
Balanced geographically.
And the interview itself was a perfect opportunity for Harris to talk about one of the most important issues of the election, to speak authentically. And I thought this was a 10 out of 10. And one particular clip I think illustrates why. Let's go to this discussion on the issue of abortion.
I was raised Catholic, and abortion is a sin. And when I put out that episode, I had a lot of women reach out to me saying like, wow, I live in the South and I never thought about it that way. Like, maybe I am pro-choice because I won't get an abortion because of my religion, but why should we control what someone else wants to do?
And you know what's interesting, Alex, to your point, what I'm finding as I travel, people who before 2 years ago, before Roe v. Wade was overturned, people who felt very strong about that they are anti-abortion, are now seeing what's happening and saying, I didn't intend for all this to happen. And I think that's also why in state after state, so-called red states and so-called blue states, when this issue has been on the ballot, the American people are voting for freedom. Because ultimately it's about, look, this is not about imposing my thoughts on you in terms of what you do with your life or your body. It's actually quite the opposite. It's saying the government shouldn't be telling people what to do.
We've talked about that on here before. We've talked about how many people there are who thought they were anti-choice until there was no choice anymore.
This is what they call a permission structure in politics, right? She's giving a permission structure to people who don't agree with her on the morality of abortion to still be with her on the public policy and on the question of freedom, to say, like, look, there are two different ways to think about values as it relates to disagreements when it comes to abortion. You could think of the morality of the underlying act, right? Which obviously you're not going to persuade somebody in the last 3 weeks of the election to change their mind on that, or not a significant amount of people. But what she is saying is there's another value at stake here, which is freedom. And I'm trying to speak to you on that level. And I thought this was really smart, just absolutely brilliant stuff. And you could see by the tone of it, she was very comfortable in this interview, very comfortable in this terrain. Surprised Jason, very comfortable in women's issues generally. Like when they talked about difficult issues, there's a part of this interview that we're not going to air, but it was all about sexual assault. And I don't think I've ever heard Harris as compelling and as thoughtful as she was during that particular discussion. And honestly, it was like, you and I often talk about how bad guests politicians are. Like, it's why you don't hear a lot of them on this podcast. She didn't sound like a politician during huge swaths of this interview. And for that reason, I think this was a particularly impactful interview to do.
I agree. And I think that's actually true of a lot of her appearances across, the different interviews she's been doing lately. I think she's doing a really good job of coming across like a human being and not a talking point machine. And that makes a big difference.
Well, let's go to another clip from that interview.
Imagine she's in a state with an abortion ban. 1 out of 3 women are, by the way, in our country. And she's a mom. So she's going to have to figure out, one, God help her if she has affordable childcare. God help her if she has paid leave. And then she's going to have to go to the airport, stand in a TSA line, sit on a plane next to a perfect stranger, to go to a city where she's never been, to receive the care she needs. She's going to probably have to get right back on that plane because she's got those kids. Her best friend's probably not with her because that's who's taking care of the kids. To get back in that TSA line, to get back on a plane, to go home.
It's very compelling.
Concrete, right? Like
humanizing.
Keeping it concrete. Well, she also went on Colbert, and there was a lot we could play from that clip, but there was one interesting exchange where Colbert asked Harris, did Trump lose?
Tell you what, man, I don't know about you, but the first ad that seems to come up, this first sponsored ad that comes up for me, particularly on X, is like every time I open it, is an anti-Harris ad that is just her laughing over and over again. And I don't know who they tested that with, but I think they got a false result, because I think the fact that she is loose and allows herself to laugh over and over again. Yeah, her laugh is unique. And they seem to think that that's bad, because they seem to think that anything that is associated with anything even adjacent to femininity, which is her being a woman and laughing, is naturally bad. I don't think so. I think that it is infectious and it is joy.
I agree. And actually, I've gone through a journey with Harris, I think in part because the Harris that I spent the most time with, I think was a Harris that was controlled and actually, like, I think doing herself a disservice. And I understand why. She was trying to make it out of a crowded primary. She was caught between the sort of pull of the progressive left and what I think her true nature is, which is what we're seeing here. I actually think she's a fairly moderate, interesting character. Eclectic, I like to use the word, character. Hard. I think she's hard to corner, in part because she's textured like a lot of people are. And I honestly think part of the reason why there's a disconnect on the laugh is I actually think the laugh itself is different, because I think the laugh that I was seeing from her before, and this is total psychoanalysis, was a version of her where she was really pent up and like trying to control herself because of the various demands and calculations that she made in politics. Whereas what I see from her now is a much more comfortable person who is way more confident and is showing the version of her that I had heard existed behind the scenes way more often. And I'm sure there's a version of it, which is I just wasn't getting the full exposure to her. I wasn't watching her as closely as I do now. But I think that's probably what the Republicans miscalculated on, is they didn't know her. Like a lot of us didn't know her. And I think the real strength of what they've done here is they have waited till the final few weeks to really unleash her on the public. And every interview that she does, in my opinion, is must-see TV, because you learn something new about her, and she doesn't sound like a politician.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And here's what I think the disconnect was. When she ran for president in 2020, she was, by the nature of having run in that cycle, she was forced into a cycle that really didn't fit the way she sees the world, right? How does Kamala, like we've talked about before, I don't know her that well. I know her enough. And also, just like if you read her stuff, like you understand how she sees the world, that she is a Black woman from Oakland who chose to become a prosecutor after going away to school, getting educated in great institutions, and also is, despite what Trump may say, is not exactly a woman who was apart from her own Black identity, right? Like she went to Howard, and then she goes back to the Bay Area, and instead of becoming a defense attorney, instead of going into more of the activist left, she is a woman who believed from the beginning that you could make positive change from within the system. She is a person who believes that the institutions have value, right? And what was 2020? 2020 was an election cycle that was, taking place in the shadow of the unrest that followed George Floyd, all of that, right? And it was the defund the police debate and that kind of thing. And I can tell you, like, without talking out of school, from conversations with her, she was not comfortable with that environment and that being like the expectation. And now, as that stuff has sort of, did you lose your lights there?
Yes.
As that stuff is in the rear view, that moment, not the issues, but the moment is in the rear view. Now it's very much hey, she's the vice president of the United States who's been doing things, and her belief, her basic animating belief that government is a place where justice can be served for people, it really fits the moment very well. And I think that makes her very comfortable.
Well, while she's been doing her media tour, and we're going to get to more of those appearances, probably the most notable Trump appearance over the past week was his return to Butler, Pennsylvania, the site of the first assassination attempt. And he brought along his sidekick, Elon Musk, who was hopping around behind him. A lot of memes there. He was showing his belly to all of us. Thank you for that. And he made some, I think, notable remarks Musk did after Trump spoke. Let's go to this clip.
Free speech is the bedrock of democracy. And if people don't know what's going on, if they don't know the truth, how can you make an informed vote? You must have free speech in order to have democracy. That's why it's the First Amendment. And the Second Amendment is there to ensure that we have the First Amendment. President Trump must win to preserve the Constitution. He must win to preserve democracy in America.
What a tool, man. That guy's such a disappointment.
Well, okay. I don't know what part of that is worth unpacking first, but the idea that you're touting the Second Amendment at the site where Trump was shot, really takes some chutzpah. The second part of this is the idea that the Second Amendment is there to protect the First Amendment. Look, we don't need to bring like Akhil Amar onto this podcast to talk about the Constitution, but like let's play with that for a second. Like, what exactly does he have in mind? And when he ends that part of the remarks by saying Trump must win to preserve our democracy, you don't really have to read between the lines to get what they're saying and how dangerous it is.
You know what's interesting to me is that you got these people who they get kind of canceled or they fall out of favor, and so then they find that, oh wow, the right, which I've never been on, but the right wing, there seems to be a place for me there. Kid Rock, Russell Brand, people. There's no shortage of these folks who are sort of they eventually get there. Dennis Miller kind of toyed with it for a while, where their career sort of runs its course, or they make a mistake that offends a lot of people, and then they go, well, I guess I do this now. Elon Musk is, depending on the day, either the first or second richest human on the earth. And yet, having people say mean things to him on an app that he owns, combined with people thinking he's kind of strange, has driven him to this place. This is a guy who was a Democrat. This is a guy who used to say that climate change was the biggest threat to humanity, and that was at the center of everything he believed politically. And now he's out there like, he doesn't talk about climate change ever.
Well, what's interesting is you mentioned Russell Brand and Elon Musk. What do those two have in common? Their most aggressive turn right happened nearly the day they were accused of sexual assault. Both of them.
Yeah, that's right.
If people forget this about Musk, he had been, he'd been erratic and saying crazy things in the lead up to that accusation from, I think it was a flight attendant.
Yeah.
But it was that day that accusation was coming out that he said, I declare for the Republican Party. That should tell you a lot about how they view the Republican Party and what the Republican Party has become. Obviously, the man at the top of the ticket has had multiple credible accusations of sexual assault against him.
And some judgments.
Yes, and judgments. But this is what happens. Like, this is what, if you're Diddy, right? I wouldn't be shocked if Diddy, who's resides now down the street from where I am at this very moment, what if he got out on bail or just gets exonerated or whatever, will be a Republican, because this is where you go if you're accused of sexual assault, is that somebody's going to have your back in that party, no matter how guilty you are.
It goes to my general conspiracy theory about the way. It's not even conspiracy, about the way Republican economics match up with Republican morality, which is, if the market will sustain it, it is therefore virtuous. And Republicans look at behavior and they look at, offensive statements as, if the voters will still support it, or if there's still an audience for it, it was never wrong in the first place. It's the same. Anything is virtuous so long as there's a market for it.
Well, Dave Wasserman tweeted out that helpful finding from NBC News September poll: Elon Musk's national favorable unfavorable is at 34%, 45%, including an anemic 31-36 among independents. So not exactly the greatest surrogate for Trump here. And I'm just not sure who's persuaded by this. This is obviously in keeping with their strategy, which is really go at young men, right? So they're really micro-targeting with Musk here. And the question is, are there enough new young men they could bring into the electorate to matter? And that, I think, is one of the most important questions of this entire race.
I think for the people at home, when Elon Musk comes up and his endorsement of Trump comes up, I would simply say this. I would say, what are the two motivations that Elon Musk has for endorsing Donald Trump? One, Elon Musk loves attention, and he loves, just like Trump, he loves anybody who will fawn over him, and this crowd will, and that crowd does. People who worship wealth, including people who don't have wealth. Some of them will worship wealth, and so they worship him. But I think that there's a second, larger reason, and that is that Elon Musk has made an enormous percentage of his fortune on government contracts. And Elon Musk is like, I need Trump to win because I want to do more government contracts. I want to continue to be what is it? What's his space thing? SpaceX. I want that to be the big contractor that basically does the NASA stuff. All the contracts that he's gotten to build Tesla, like, he's got motivations. One of them is personal. One of them is his bank account.
Well, we're going to take an ad break. When we come back, we're going to talk Trump and Putin. We're going to talk about some hurricanes. We're going to talk about some policy proposals from Harris, and we're going to get to the polls. Forget everything you know about fasting. Prolon by L Nutra is the only patented fasting mimicking diet that combines the benefits of prolonged fasting with a science-backed nutrition plan so that you could hit your health and weight loss goals without actually having to give up all the food. Introducing Prolon, a revolutionary plant-based nutrition program that nourishes the body while making cells believe they're fasting. Researched and developed for decades at the University of Southern California Longevity Institute and backed by leading U.S. medical centers, Prolon helps promote healthy blood sugar, support cardiovascular health, and reduce abdominal fat. But Prolon isn't a diet. Prolon is science based on Nobel Prize winning discoveries in medicine, and this all starts with Prolon's 5-day program, snacks, soups, beverages, all designed to keep your body in a fasting state, and it's unlike anything you've ever experienced. I did the 5-day program, and I feel so much better. Prolon really isn't like any other diet I've tried because it's not a diet. It's truly science. And it was so convenient. They sent me everything I needed all in one box. It was amazing. And it's no wonder why thousands of doctors now recommend Prolon to support healthy blood sugar and cardiovascular health. Right now, Prolon is offering Majority 54 listeners 15% off their 5-day nutrition program. Go to prolonlife.com/majority54. That's Prolon, PROLON, life.com/majority54 for the special offer. That's prolonlife.com/majority54. This episode is sponsored by Rhone. If you're like me, you understand the pains of finding what to wear. Most clothes are uncomfortable. They may be too tight. They never, actually fit your size because, a lot of us are not exactly small, medium, large, extra large. We're complicated. Sometimes when you find something you like, you can only wear it for a few hours before that important meeting or dinner, and then you have to change it into something else. And everyone wants to dress their best. You want to look good at all times. And frankly, it's a confidence booster. So here's the deal. Men's closets were due for a radical reinvention, and Rhone stepped up to the challenge. Rhone's commuter collection is the most comfortable, breathable, and flexible set of products known to man, and here's why. Rhone helps you get ready for any occasion with the commuter collection, which offers the world's most comfortable pants, dress shirts, quarter zips, and polos. You never have to worry about what to wear when you have the Rhone commuter collection. And here's some anecdote. I'm wearing my Rhone pants right now. And last week I was at a wedding. I wore my Rhone button-down shirt to the wedding at a formal wedding, and I will also wear it tomorrow when I just go into a coffee shop to have a meeting. It's that versatile. So it's time to feel confident without the hassle. With Rhone's wrinkle release technology, wrinkles disappear as you stretch and wear the products. It's that easy. Yeah, I actually not so neatly folded that shirt in my bag for the wedding, and I was able to take it out, and automatically I was able to put it on. It looked like I had ironed it, but I didn't. It's an inside secret between us. So with Gold Fusion anti-odor technology, you'll also be smelling fresh and clean all day. On top of that, Rhone is 100% machine washable, so you can dish the dry cleaner all together. We're on the move a lot, and the Rhone commuter collection has never let me down. The versatility and overall comfort of the collection is undefeated. I absolutely love it. And even after I wear it all day, I feel super fresh because that Gold Fusion anti-odor technology. At that wedding, I was dancing up a storm, wore it, no problems. So the commuter collection can get you through any work day and straight into whatever comes next. So head to Rhone.com/majority and use the promo code majority to save 20% off your entire order. That's 20% off your entire order when you head to RHONE.com/majority and use the code majority. It's time to find your corner office comfort. Well, Jason, Bob Woodward just dropped some major revelations involving Trump and Vladimir Putin. Let's go to a clip from CNN.
But there's also some notable news about Donald Trump in this book. There are new details about former President Trump's relationship with Vladimir Putin. Specifically, the book reveals phone calls never before revealed between Trump and Putin, including a verbatim conversation where they discuss that Trump secretly sent to Putin scarce COVID testing machines for his personal use. This was at a time during the height of COVID where everybody wanted one of these. And we actually have, Woodward has the conversation between Trump and Putin in the book. Here's what they said. Putin, please don't tell anybody you sent these to me. Trump, I don't care, fine. Putin, no, I don't want you to tell anybody because people will get mad at you, not me. They don't care about me. Woodward also writes that a top Trump aide, Pamela, told him that Trump had as many as 7 phone calls with Vladimir Putin post-presidency since he left office.
You know, I handed to Woodward. That dude has figured out how to roll out a book. I mean, you can debate like the, I don't know, journalistic ethics of the fact that the guy he'll get information and that's relevant and sit on it for like a year, 2 years, and then eventually. But I'm convinced that at this point, as he's doing the work for the book, he stumbles upon things and goes in his head, "Oh yes, that will come out 2 weeks before the book comes out." Like, I mean, he's got that down.
Well, what's interesting is he's equally opened himself up to criticism from the right wing for waiting until right before the election. So when I see commentary on Twitter from a lot of my progressive friends, like, how dare you hold on to this information? First of all, what was there to be done?
Yeah, I don't have a real problem with it. I'm just like, that's
honestly,
impressive.
It's the best. If I were to decide myself when to put this out, sure. Now is great. Maybe the day before the election. I don't know.
Yeah.
Not that, and I don't think it's actually going to move many people because this is baked in, but it's just horrible. Obviously, Harris was asked about this on Colbert.
So first of all, great job by her. I think that it's a very important frame that she's using when she creates stakes for why it matters that he's friends and admires these dictators, because Donald Trump is a guy who, if you flatter him, he'll do what you want. And she's making that clear, that he's getting played by them. Because if you just say, and I think this is a mistake that Democrats made for a long time, if you just say he buddies up to Kim Jong-un, like, you're not creating stakes. You're not creating a reason for why that matters. And I think she's doing a good job of landing that plane and saying, this is why it matters, because they get stuff from him and they take things from us. I don't think the COVID test thing matters that much, because people are so done politically. I mean, it matters to you and me, and we think it's terrible. But politically, I think people are like, they don't want to be a part of COVID politics. And our ability to just revise history, it just feels so foreign now. The time when oh my gosh, you have a test, you have a COVID test, you have one at your house, like, it's hard for us to recall that. But I think she did a great job. What about you? Yeah,
I totally agree. And, it's like you say, it's tough to say what's going to move the voters, but the frame, I think, is the right one. That it's weakness that he's getting played. It's not strength. Like, he's trying to portray this strength. But he's easily manipulated, as she showed us during that debate.
Well, she should never say this. Nobody should say this nobody who wants to be in her cabinet, which I don't, should ever say anything like this, just because that's not where my life is at the moment. I like the school my kids go to and that kind of thing. But what you should say to your friends when you're talking about this very controversy is the difference between the two of them is that if her administration were to send medical devices to an adversary of the United States, it would be an assassination attempt. And when he does it, no, that's not what it is. It's just trying to be friends, and taking that stuff away from Americans. And that's a pretty big difference in standing up for American national security.
Well, let's shift gear and talk about these hurricanes. Like, as we speak right now, we're recording Wednesday at 3:17 p.m. Eastern time. Hurricane Milton is making landfall in Florida. It has been downgraded to a Category 4 hurricane, which still seems pretty threatening. And Tampa and the Tampa area are particularly hard hit. So hopefully everybody out there listening, if you're from that area, you're either gotten out or you're somewhere safe. There's a lot of politics to talk about this. I think we tackled a lot of it last week. Since last week, there's been even more misinformation about everything that has happened in North Carolina in particular. We could spend hours talking through all of this, but let's just hear from the FEMA administrator talking about how challenging the information environment has been.
Yeah, I mean, his accusations are just completely false. I think the first thing I would say is just because you don't see somebody on the ground in a FEMA shirt doesn't mean what we don't have people there. We have people that are embedded in the State Emergency Operations Center. I have teams that are walking around neighborhoods. I have teams that are embedded with all of the county EOCs. People are on the ground, but we're also bringing in resources, and it's not just FEMA. We are one part of the federal family. We have over 3,400 members from across all federal agencies in North Carolina helping to support this response. We will continue to bring in more resources as we go into the recovery and the long-term needs that these communities have. Kate, we really have just got to stop this rhetoric, because what it's doing is it's putting fear in the people that we're not going to be there to help them. And I worry that they won't register for assistance with us and get access to the critical resources that they are eligible for.
Shout out to the emergency responders of Boone County, Missouri, who I think Kip Kendrick has sent many of them there. That you could see the pictures. If you look at the back of the uniforms of the people in that clip, it says Boone County, Missouri. They're in Florida. So anyway, that's not what you wanted to talk about.
Well, Mitt Romney was asked about this misinformation, and I thought he said something interesting. Let's go to this clip.
They will make a heroic effort to try and do so. I actually don't think that's going to significantly impact the election, but the amount of disinformation is really extraordinary, although it's not just being put out by the Russians and the Chinese. I mean, former President Trump told us that the people in Springfield are eating dogs and cats, all right? I mean, he likewise said that FEMA money, our emergency money, instead of helping the people that have been hit by the hurricane, is being used to help illegals. I mean, he just makes it up. And so he is able to spew enough disinformation that the Chinese must be smiling.
Well, he also unfortunately said, I think it was yesterday or the day before, that he will not be officially endorsing Harris because he wants to play a role in the conversation around the future of the Republican Party. Now, his history here is really interesting. He was pressed about whether he was going to vote for Harris, and he said, something to the effect of, like, based on my statements and everything, it should be obvious to everybody who I'm voting for. But then I looked into his background, and I'm like, it's actually not. He did like a write-in, I think in 2016, and then in 2020, he implied he was going to vote for Biden, but didn't say explicitly. So you have a mixed record here. So when he says it's obvious what I'm doing, I'm like, Mitt Romney, like,
it's purposefully not obvious.
Yeah. And like, I want to give you credit for showing more backbone than other Republicans on so many issues, but like, why not just fully get there? I just really don't get it. Like,
yeah, I think it's generational. I mean, how old is Mitt Romney? He's in his 70s, right?
Probably, yeah.
If you've been on this earth 70 years and you've really for your entire conscious life seen yourself as a Republican and known that your dad, I think didn't his dad run for president as a Republican?
Yeah, had his own moment where I think it was on the Vietnam War, if I'm correct.
I think that's right.
He basically lost the primary because he took a stand.
His dad was governor of Michigan, I think, right?
Yeah.
So, going back even before your family are Republicans, I think it's even harder for you to come to grips with the idea that the Republican Party, that you cannot be a part of saving the Republican Party and bringing it back to where it should be. It's very hard to come to grips with that reality, in the same way that it was very difficult for President Biden to come to grips with the reality that he wasn't the best person to lead the Democratic Party this time. So I give him on this, I will give him a little bit of a pass for being, I would say, naive enough to believe that simply by not officially endorsing Kamala Harris, he will remain in enough good standing to, be able to influence what the Republican Party does. But, I think, I don't know how many people it would move anyway if Romney. Now, one person who I give no pass to and who should be out there saying stuff is George W. Bush. If Dick Cheney has the courage to come out and say it, George W. Bush should put down the paintbrush and get out there and tell everybody what we already think is the case, which is he's going to vote for Kamala Harris. I think a former president of the United States who's a Republican saying that would be a big enough deal.
Look, Jason, he could keep the paintbrush in his hand.
I
I will
know.
go there and I will film him Bob Ross style, where he could just tell us a story about
Yeah.
how he's changed his mind.
There's a happy little tree that's voting for Kamala Harris. Look at this. happy little
Absolutely fine. Now, we're not going to debunk all the misinformation on this. There's plenty of places to go for like good explainers on what's actually going on. The Harris campaign has tweeted out like the names of the many, many Republicans who voted against FEMA funding like 2 weeks ago, as we knew the hurricane season was, basically ramping up. And what the Republicans are trying to do here, and what Trump is trying to do, is absolve themselves of very real responsibility for any issues about FEMA's solvency, which, by the way, the Biden administration has guaranteed everything that the hurricane hit states have asked for. Like basically every governor has said, I've gotten what I've asked for. The federal government has been really responsive. There's a particularly pernicious piece of misinformation out there that he alluded to about the FEMA money going to migrants, which is a rounding error. In the FEMA budget, it is nothing even remotely material in the FEMA budget, and it's a separately appropriated budget line. So it's completely false that the money is being appropriated. So if you're getting asked about this at home, number one, the states are getting what they're asking for. So there actually isn't a short-term funding issue for FEMA, but on the long term, and in terms of the solvency, it's actually the Republicans who voted against increased FEMA funding, and who are obviously always trying to strangle government. There was accusations that there was political motivation in the hurricane response aid, which absolutely is unfounded. All the Republican governors said that they felt like it was very responsive, but at the same time, it came out that emergency management officials within the Trump administration said that he was slow walking and resisting wildfire aid to California when he was president, because he felt like it was a liberal state and had to be showed maps of the politics of Central Valley, California, to show that it was there were actually a lot of Republicans in there to actually release the aid. So it's like it's a classic every accusation is an admission moment.
Listeners, on this subject, you must emphasize to your friends and family that the way it works is Republicans tell you that government can't work, and then they do everything they can to make government not work. And then they say, look, we told you. And first example, Obamacare. They did everything they possibly could when Obamacare was being crafted and passed to undermine it and to take really important provisions out of it. And then once it passed, they spent all their time talking it down and defunding it, trying to do everything they could to make sure it wasn't successful, while telling you that it wasn't successful. And it turns out it's very successful. But for many years, people believed it wouldn't be and that it wasn't. With the pandemic, what did they do? They absolutely gutted the pandemic response program that Obama was putting in place when he was leaving office, or like before he left office. And what did they do? They shelved that, right? And then proved, oh, look, it can't work, right? Afghanistan, we're not absolving the Biden administration from its responsibility in the problems in the Afghanistan pullout, but it should be noted that they absolutely gutted the visa department and all of that stuff at the State Department, because they don't believe in refugees. And so as a result, it made it much more difficult for them to actually respond to the Afghanistan stuff. And now with FEMA, where they're like, we don't want to fund it. And then it's underfunded and they say, look, the Democrats are messing this up. It's the same stuff over and over again.
Well, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about a really exciting policy proposal and announcement from Harris, and then we're going to look at the polls. Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath. And on the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs and gives you tailored advice to improve your nutrition, workout, sleep, and even stress management. All you have to do is breathe into your Lumen first thing in the morning, and you'll know what's going on with your metabolism and whether you're burning mostly fats or carbs. And then Lumen gives you a personalized nutrition plan for that day based on your measurements. You could also breathe into it before and after workouts and meals, so you know exactly what's going on in your body in real time. And Lumen will give you tips to keep on top of your health game. This is really important. I've been running this fitness community for years, and often what I hear from people is My metabolism is X, my metabolism is Y. But this actually gives you the data to actually confirm or in some ways challenge some assumptions you have about your body. And because your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does, optimal metabolic health translates to a bunch of benefits, including easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness levels, better sleep, and it could track your cycle as well as the onset of menopause and adjust your recommendations to keep your metabolism healthy through hormonal shifts so you can keep up your energy and stave off cravings. So if you want to take the next step in improving your health, go to lumen.me/majority to get 15% off your Lumen. That's lumen.me/majority for 15% off your purchase. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode.
Fall can be a stressful season, and stress leads to feeling drained. To maintain your energy levels and a heart-healthy routine, it's best to avoid relying on stimulants. Superbeats Heart Chews offer a convenient, delicious, plant-based way to support healthy blood pressure and circulation. Enjoy a heart-healthy boost without the jitters. Paired with a healthy lifestyle, the unique antioxidant compound in Superbeats is clinically shown to be nearly 2 times more effective at promoting normal blood pressure than a healthy lifestyle alone. Superbeats Heart Chews are incredibly delicious and so much better than any alternative supplements out there. I take my Superbeats Heart Chews each morning, and it helps me kickstart my morning routine. After taking my Superbeats Heart Chews, I feel like I have more energy and I'm ready to take on the day. Here's something: more doctors, pharmacists, and cardiologists recommend Superbeats for heart health support than any other beet brand. Superbeats Heart Chews also offer a convenient way to support healthy blood pressure since they're individually wrapped so you can take them on the go. Double your potential with Superbeats Heart Chews. Get a free 30-day supply of Superbeats Heart Chews on all bundles and 15% off your first order by going to getsuperbeats.com and using code MAJORITY. That's getsuperbeets.com, code MAJORITY.
All right, Jason. Well, super, we want to talk about policy here, but I actually think policy and messaging sometimes go hand in hand. And Harris and her team did something I think really important and smart today. They announced something big on The View. Speaking of this sort of press tour, let's go to this clip.
I took care of my mother when she was sick. She was diagnosed with cancer. Mm-hmm. And so it is a personal experience for me as well as something I care deeply about. Taking care of a parent, that means trying to cook what they want to eat, right? What they can eat. It means picking out clothes for them that that's soft enough that it doesn't irritate their skin, right? It means trying to think of something funny to make them laugh or smile. Yeah. And there's so much about that really is about giving folks dignity. Mm-hmm. And to your point about being in the sandwich generation, there are so many people in our country who are right in the middle. They're taking care of their kids and they're taking care of their aging parents. Mm-hmm. And it's just almost impossible to do it all. Especially if they work, we're finding that so many are then having to leave their job, which means losing a source of income. Yeah. Not to mention the emotional stress. Mm-hmm. And so what I am proposing is that basically what we will do is allow Medicare to cover in-home health care. Oh. Fine. Right. And because we're talking about these kinds of things where it's just about helping an aging parent or person, prepare a meal.
Ravi, you have heard me say many times that where the Democratic Party tends to miss is we don't understand that what we have to talk about is letting people have their family happy, healthy, safe, and nearby. And the importance of home and being able to stay home geographically, but also literally in your home. And I'm so excited by this, like the way she talks about it, the way she clearly has genuine personal experience with it. I think they should get that message out as broadly as possible, because I think a lot of people will be like, oh, she understands what I'm going through.
Well, and there's something she did in both this clip and the Alex Cooper clip, the first one that we mentioned, which is she gets super concrete, right? She talked about in the Cooper clip, like somebody getting on a plane and what it's like going to another state, and walks you through the experience. And she did so here. What are her clothes feel like? What kind of food you're eating? And I think this is really important and signals, I think, a really important evolution of democratic messaging, where the more concrete you are, the more you put people in the shoes of the people affected, the more they'll remember it and the more it'll resonate with them. And I think this is particularly powerful. My grandfather, one of the things that was in the announcement for Harris was that they were talking about how people have to basically spend down before they get long-term care, whether it's at home or in nursing homes, which I believe is part of this proposal as well. And so you spend down your money like my grandfather did, so that you have no assets left, so you can qualify for Medicaid, right? And that's if you're lucky enough to have assets in the first place. Some people are just on Medicaid. And so then you go on Medicaid, and Medicaid will cover some of these costs, not all of them, and certainly are not going to really do a good job of keeping you in your home. And what winds up happening is you put your family in tremendous stress, right? Like if you have a spouse, if you have any hope of getting out of whatever long-term care, you'll have nothing to go back to, right? Your spouse will have nothing. And then for future generations, right, you have nothing to leave to your kids and your grandkids. And it makes you ashamed and bums you out that you have nothing to leave people. And I think this is really important because a lot of people have been through something like that. I went through it with my grandfather. And when you compare that to a party in the Republicans who are fighting fiercely to keep the inheritance tax for millionaires, not the inheritance tax if you have like a, $500,000 house in the suburbs of Michigan, right? We're not talking about that. We're talking about inheritance of millions of dollars, in some cases, hundreds of millions of dollars. Republicans have fiercely fought to keep that as low as possible. And they have fought for that with so much more energy and initiative and so much more successfully than they have anything even approaching what Kamala Harris just described.
It's just a great example of her demonstrating she understands what people are going through and demonstrating her belief that government can solve people's problems when applied correctly. And I think it's really exciting.
Well, she was asked about this on Stern. Let's go to that clip.
Like I announced today, what my plan to make sure that Medicare covers at-home elder care, because probably a lot of your listeners are in that sandwich generation.
Oh, my God.
Where they're taking care of young kids and their elder parents.
My mother's 97 years old. I'm not even going to tell you how old I am. I know you think I'm 30, but I am so old. And I have an old mother, 97 years old. The cost is, people don't know this yet. If they're not taking care of somebody elderly, it will bankrupt you.
Absolutely.
It will
right. Your parent will not get the care they need, or you're going to have to leave your job.
Right.
Which means you're going to reduce your income to, depending on what it is, almost nothing in terms of your household income to do what you want to do, which is to give your parent the dignity they deserve with care.
And can you imagine if Medicare is impacted, or Obamacare for that matter?
And look at what Donald Trump has been talking about for years, and look at his Project 2025. People should Google it. I mean, what they're doing and what he's talking about in terms of attacking Social Security, Medicare, undoing the Affordable Care Act, and which means the insurance companies can come back and deny people with pre-existing conditions. All of this is very real and very much at stake in this election.
One could, ask like, well, how is she going to pay for this? How is she going to pass that? Whatever. I mean, that is an interesting discussion. What's fascinating is on the same day, the Wall Street Journal put out an article comparing, and it was from a nonprofit organization that's mission is to decrease budget deficits. So one could say like a more conservative leaning nonprofit. And their findings, they looked at Harris and Trump's proposals and found that Trump over the next 10 years would add to the federal deficit over $7 trillion, whereas Harris would add to it about a little over $3 trillion. You add in this proposal, which will cost about $40 billion a year. She's still not even in the vicinity of the deficit impact that Trump will have, while Trump is also gutting the programs that we depend upon. So you take into account all the things she's described. So somehow he is going to add more than double what Harris is going to add to the budget deficit, while also cutting entitlements. That is a scary prospect.
What's unique about this campaign promise, because that's what it is, it's a policy proposal during a campaign, is it is an excellent idea that has not been talked about anywhere near enough, and is like by virtue of the fact that it hasn't been a mainstream conversation, people have sure talked about it a lot in the policy world of healthcare, but it's not universal healthcare. It's not student loans. It's not something we talk about all the time. It is a very good idea because it'll help a lot of people, because it will create a lot of good paying jobs for a whole generation of people. This stuff cannot be done by AI. It cannot be done by robots. Those are all good reasons. The other thing is, Ravi, it has the unique aspect of, I think you could pass a version of this. I think it is so popular that if she leans into this, if she becomes president and leans into this, like in her first 100 days, I don't know that she gets her whole package passed, but I think the pressure to accept something by the Republicans would be it would be large. It would be a huge amount of pressure because it's so popular.
Yeah, let them say no, and we'll get to that problem when we get there, right? Well, and hopefully, when we get there, we'll have independent Dan Osborne from Nebraska, who now has 3 polls in a row showing him ahead in that race. So that is a real race out there.
My guy.
Definitely keeps the Senate map alive for us. There have been other polls. Some are less good for us. There's a poll in Florida showing that the abortion measure at the moment is falling short. A plurality of voters expressed support for the measure, with more who said they'd vote no and a large percentage who are undecided. But Florida requires 60% of voters to approve any ballot measure, so it hasn't cleared that hurdle. There was a New York Times Sienna poll that just was released that shows Harris with a narrow lead. And what was fascinating about it was that it shows her as the change candidate, which is remarkable given that she's the sitting vice president. It also showed her with a 49-41 lead on who cares about people like you. It also showed a massive Trump lead in Florida, I think something like 14 points, which lends credence to, I think we talked about on this podcast, the theory that perhaps the electoral college bias against Democrats is going to be less this cycle because Trump is picking up votes in states that aren't really at the top of people's lists as swing states.
Yeah. How do you feel? What's your vibe feel right now about all the polls aside?
Yeah, it's funny. My vibe is very much, I think, in sync with a poll that was released while we were sitting here, which is the Quinnipiac polls, which everybody's freaking out on Twitter, from what I understand right now, about, because it showed Harris going from +5 in Michigan to -4. It also shows her down 2 in Wisconsin, but within the margin of error, the last poll, which showed her +1, but ahead in Pennsylvania. So people are freaking out about those 3 polls taken together. Now, where's my head at on the negative side of things? One is Republicans have a sizable voter registration advantage in key states that we have data for, which makes me a little bit paranoid about expanding the electorate and their strategy. 2 is there was a Zogby poll last week that showed 50-50 for Arab American voters, which is by far the most favorable poll for Arab American voters in my lifetime, probably, for Republicans.
Yeah.
And it is in line with my instinct about a real shift going on in Michigan. Alyssa Slotkin has been ringing alarm bells there about where she felt like Harris was underwater there. I think there's probably more likely than not that we lose Michigan. Obviously, everything is like within the range of possibility, but I do think Michigan is the most in danger of those 3 states. I think they're all very much a contention for both candidates. So we could lose all 3, we could win all 3. But I think Michigan is really dangerous for us right now, especially given everything that's going on in the Middle East and everything that's going on with the electric cars debate there, which seems to be really muddy and ugly. You throw in that the very uncertain impact of the hurricane misinformation and how that's making its way through the internet. So you put all that on one side to say there is a lot Trump has to work with here. And he's obviously doing everything he can to muddy those waters. On the flip side, I think Harris is just getting started with these media blitzes. Every one of these things that she does is really going to significantly improve her chances. She has a much better ground game. She has much more money, much more resources to put her message out there. And so you put those 2 things together, and I think we're at a 50-50 race.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm going to use a Royals baseball analogy to say where I think we are. It's very similar, but so the Royals spent most of this season in in a playoff spot. Like most of the season, you could say if the season ended today, the Royals would make the playoffs. And then in the last few weeks before the season ended, they went on a pretty big losing streak. And then it became, okay, they are just hanging on, but if they don't stem the tide, they're going to end up out of the playoffs. And then with like 3 days to go, or 3 or 4 games to go, it was like, oh, we've broken the losing streak. And it's a toss-up as to whether we get in, except we control our own destiny. It became, if the Royals do what they're supposed to do in the next few days, it doesn't matter what any other team does, we'll win. And I think where we are right now is like we were feeling way up momentum-wise. The debate where she absolutely, kicked his butt, the huge surge of momentum that we got out of Biden stepping aside and Harris coming in, that all felt like, hey, we've spent most of this most recent season in a playoff spot. And then things started to even out. And like there were some struggles, not even struggles, like she hasn't done anything wrong, but Americans have a short, attention span. And Trump hasn't said anything like eating dogs and cats in 3 weeks or whatever it's been. You put all that together and then the feeling of chaos that exists, like the hurricane response has been fantastic by the federal government, but it feels chaotic, right? And that makes people anxious.
Yeah, Jason, it feels chaotic because it's a hurricane.
Because it's a hurricane. Yeah.
But
but it's like, anxiety inducing, and that's bad for, the party that is in power at the moment. So you have all that together, and it reminds me of the Royals in the last few days of the season, which is those of us who are talking right now and who listen to this show and who watch, we control our own destiny. It is a 50-50 toss-up race. But if you live in a swing state and you get your ass out there and you knock on the doors and you make sure everybody, and then if you call everybody who's in swing states and you keep giving money and you keep supporting the candidates, if you're not in a swing state, but you support candidates in contested races where you are, if we all do our work, we control our own destiny. We don't need other breaks to win, but it doesn't mean we're going to. So
yeah,
that's where I think it is.
Well, it's a good segue to one for us. So we've got this Yankees Royals series, which is 1-1. And I really wish I could make it more interesting to the audience. I got some messages being like, you and Jason talking. I'm like, man,
you don't really care about baseball.
No, it's like, it's honestly, it's kind of a version of probably how you probably feel now about the Chiefs versus the Bills, which is like, yeah, we may steal one here and there, but it's like, it's just so, the Yankees are so, like, they spoiled me so much as a kid that I can't, it eviscerated that, plus the real problems with baseball's cap and how the Yankees will always be in contention. Yeah. Just have screwed up any motivation I have to be a true Yankee fan. I won't even go to the stadium once they knocked Yankee Stadium down. And I found myself in the weird position this week of rooting for the Mets more than the Yankees. Like, I'm still a Yankees fan, but I'm like, I just know, like, it's like why I favor
a better story.
Well, I also favor progressive taxation because the money matters more to people at the bottom. Yeah. It's like the people who, if the Mets got a World Series win now, it would make so much more happiness for Mets fans than any of us who've lived through the Yankees renaissance. And so I'm trying to care. And it's also, we got the Liberty going on. I'm going to that game, I think, tomorrow. I'm going to try to get tickets for that. Which is right across the street there in the finals. Mm-hmm. And I've gotten really into that. We got the Knicks, coming on now with Karl Anthony Towns. And I'm sure there's NFL football going on. I haven't really been following that, Jason.
For those listening, that means the Bills have lost 2 games in a row. So Ravi doesn't acknowledge that it's still NFL.
No, I don't even know. Yeah. I heard something happened with the Jets though, but yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of sports happening. It's weird. I wish I could give more to this series. And honestly, like, I would be really happy for you guys if you want. Like, I'm still like in a like
very passive way.
Way.
You're not a baseball guy. You've never really been.
I was as a kid. It used to be my top sport as a kid, really? But I think the steroid era and the cap problems, plus the billionaire coddling that happens in New York, where they knock down our historic stadium to have fewer seats and more luxury boxes. It's just gross, I just can't get behind that. So I wish I could do more there. Yeah.
Well, all right. First of all, I agree with what you're saying in terms of sort of, it means more to people with Mets fans. But let's remember, you're talking about emotional currency there, not actual dinero, because the Mets are also one of the biggest
for sure.
payrolls in the world.
This is why I can't get behind baseball generally.
Yeah.
Like, it's a beautiful sport, but it's just so flawed. Like, could you imagine if there was a true salary cap? Like the Royals could be like the Chiefs, right? It could be any team could at any year be awesome.
Baseball needs to go one of two directions. Either have real parity like the NFL has, which I would love, right? As a dedicated, like the way you are a fan of the Bills is the way I'm a fan of the Royals. That'd be great. But if not, go the other direction. We should be, this will never happen, but it should be like the English Football League. There should be relegation and promotion. Like let, you know, if we're not going to be able to compete every year, which we're not, because we have one of the lowest payrolls in baseball, then let the Royals get relegated down some years and then let them work back up so that we have something to cheer for, and then let cash come as a result. Like, that would be awesome. I would love that. But that said, it is an awesome rivalry, particularly if you go back to before you and I were born. The Royals faced the Yankees in 76, 77, and 78 in the playoffs and lost all three of those series. In 79, and those two teams hated each other. People should go on YouTube and look up the physical fights that were happening. George Brett, Craig Nettles, Hal McRae. I mean, they were throwing it. George Brett gave a quote this week. He's the only Hall of Famer from the Royals who said, we hated each other. It was a great rivalry. And he was like, it was true hatred. And then in 79, neither team made it. And then in 80, they faced each other and the Royals finally won. So for those 5 years, it was the most iconic rivalry in sports. And now,
maybe it's like the Bills. Maybe
later,
the Bills will be the Royals in this scenario and maybe win 1 year.
Yeah, I don't know. But 44 years later, it's the Royals and the Yankees. It is the first playoff game at Kauffman Stadium tonight in 9 years. And in a couple hours, True and I, with some of his baseball teammates and some of our friends, we're going to the game. And it's going to be his first time experiencing playoff baseball. I mean, he's been to the World Baseball Classic, which was pretty cool. But what's been fun about that for this week has been, these tickets were not cheap. I bought the tickets, but True kept saying to me, he was like, because his teammates are also going from his team, but we're all sitting in different places. And he's like, well, Dad, after like the first inning, I'm sure everybody will just be able to come and there'll be empty seats around it. And I keep being like, no, buddy, this is a playoff game. There will be because he's only experienced Kauffman, when there's like 12,000, 13,000 people in the seats. And we've been watching every playoff game, Royals or anybody else. And he's like, is that what it's going to be like? I cannot wait for my son to experience a Royals playoff game at Kauffman Stadium tonight.
It's the best. Like, I remember in the 90s when the Yankees were coming on, I used to go to Yankee Stadium and I went to a few of those World Series matches. Games, we call those. I wasn't going to say anything. It was electric. Like, I till this day, I don't think I've ever experienced anything that felt like that. The closest was actually the Chiefs game you and I went to, where there's just like the air just feels different. Like there's something going on where you're like, I am in the middle of history right now. And I'm so excited for him because it's a crazy experience. There's actually nothing more beautiful than a night baseball game when the stakes matter, like in October. Like, it's just amazing.
It's, people like to talk about how baseball is boring or whatever. And it's fine. I obviously don't find it boring, but I don't have a problem with people who look at it and they say it's boring. But I don't care who you are. You may think baseball's boring. When you watch postseason baseball, where every single pitch matters, and it's not like, the regular season, 162 games, if they lose, whatever. Every pitch matters. Everybody on the field is selling out on every single play. Nobody's trying to make sure that tomorrow their hamstrings are still okay. It's not like that. And it's just everything is riding on it. Then the way baseball, the flow of baseball becomes so exciting because it's like that thing where there's a pitch, and then there's 20 seconds, and then there's a pitch. When everything rides on every pitch, there's nothing like postseason baseball.
Well, I almost think they should do, and this is becoming like work out the rules to baseball corner, but I almost think what they should do is, I know they'd made all these changes to speed up baseball, which during the regular season, I'm like all for that, because regular season baseball is a lot of issues, too many games. Like, it's just like hard to take seriously any one game that happens. Obviously, the benefit is that it's more accessible. Like you'd think, if you don't live in New
Yeah.
York, it's probably cheaper. New York's still $1 gazillion to go to the game. Why don't they slow it back down for the postseason? I want the games to be long.
I would be all for it, but you just have the problem of like it's a game of timing and rhythm.
Right.
And once you get in the rhythm, but it would be great.
All right.
This
Enough
was
of
fun. This was fun. Stay tuned for the next hour, which will be just baseball. All right. You can find me at Jason Kander on everything social media. You can find Ravi at Ravi M. Gupta on everything social media. I've noticed some people have been leaving the 5-star reviews and giving us comments on what they've liked lately. I appreciate it. If you haven't seen those, Ravi, go back and check them out. But please leave a 5-star review. Thank you to the Midas Mighty. Remember, we all have a platform. Make sure to use yours today.